All right, welcome everybody. We're excited to do a CV workshop. We'll do quick introductions here. So Dr. Wen as well, so I'll have him say hello, as well as Kim and Kevin. Kevin, do you want to have us say a quick hello?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, buddy. I'm Kevin Quach, first year med student here at UC Riverside, and I'm excited to show everyone my new and improved CV from before.
Kim?
Hi guys, my name is Kim. I'm a first year medical student and I'm excited to show you guys my process of learning how to do a proper CV from a resume.
And then Dr. Wen.
Hi everyone, I'm Han Wen. I'm the Associate Dean for Career Advising.
And welcome everybody. I'm Danny Tergucci, Executive Associate Dean for Student Affairs. And Kim and I have been working, gosh, maybe a few months to go over some CVs. So we hopefully it's useful to you as you're applying to different programs in hopefully over the break or in the soon after the winter break. So our agenda today, again, our welcome introductions. We have kind of two examples that we're going to go through. So as Kim described, she really hadn't really looked at her CV for a little bit. And so we're going to go kind of from a CV, sort of a, I don't know if we say renovation, transformation, Kim, see what that looks like going from one to the other. So you see the original, and we'll talk about the improvements. And then Kevin actually had worked a little bit more on his CV, and we went through and we kind of found hidden gems that he didn't realize that we could put in the CV or highlight and organize it. So you see kind of a more refined one. So it could be at different stages. We want to get people. So if you haven't looked at your CV for a long time, that's totally fine. You can see that transformation. If you've been working on it, hopefully we can find some ways to improve it. But my first quiz, I think everybody knows I do this from the audience. What is the difference between a resume and a CV? And I'm going to obviously pick on Kevin and Kim for this. What's the difference between a CV and a resume?
I can start with a resume. Usually a resume is like usually 1 to 2 pages. It's for like a single job. It's kind of really specific. And then a CV is a little bit different. I can let Kim take care of that one.
Yeah, a CV is just a little bit more detailed and it's highlighting your academic accolades. You get a little bit more personal. It's more than just work experiences. It's just also including all of like your achievements while you're in academia.
Great summary. I will sort of emphasize the point that Kim pointed out. Your CV is your academic story. You really want to organize it in that way. So you want to use academic language. So instead of saying sometimes work experience, you might want to say leadership, or you want to think of your portfolio as a future physician leader, teaching, mentorship, research, and the order in which you do things on the CV matters. That's what's most important. That's why education's at the top. If you're applying to a public health program, you want to put public health first. If you're doing research, maybe that's higher. Teaching, right? The order in which you do it, and there is no limitation to length. I was telling both Kevin and Kim that sometimes I've seen CVs, over 100 pages. Resumes are really designed for job-specific elements, and they're typically a little bit shorter. Just remember, CV is all about your academic journey, and that's where when we look at the CVs, you'll see kind of transformation of language, how we display research, even how you describe it. You're not really applying for a job per se, and you have ways in which you describe things that are there. Dr. Wen, do you want to add any insights about CVs or resumes before we move on?
No, I just want to emphasize again, the CV really, you'd be surprised. It's a common thing I hear from students and residents previously when I worked at UC Irvine was they would often share with me, I feel like I don't have anything to put on my CV, but you'd be surprised throughout the different activities, the different presentations, things that you will do while you're in medical school and as you progress on. So many things will add up. And it's about how you highlight it and how you present it that really makes your CV really shine and separate.
Awesome. And you're going to see this. We'll have Kim do exactly that, how you can see from how you package it, display it, articulate it. So Kim, I'll turn it over to you and take it away.
Okay, great. So I'm going to show two examples. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm going to show my first example of kind of what we started with here. So this is my first example. And basically what I have here was what I initially presented to Dr. Tergucci. It's more classically a resume, as I kind of discovered, except I added just a bunch of extra stuff at the end, which I'll kind of show you. So what I had initially done is like I had given a professional summary, which is very much typically seen in resumes. I've also highlighted kind of just skills that I had acquired while working, as well as my education background. And then I had a lot of clinical experiences because I was applying to medical school before as well. So I kind of included all of these like different experiences that I had in clinical settings, as well as just like my research experience, which actually highlighted more of like a lot of the techniques that I did rather than what my research was focused on. In addition to that, I kind of added other work experiences, such as, summer internships I did, even working at Chipotle, which had nothing to do with the clinical side. And then as well as just organizations that I had done in both undergraduate, graduate school, and now medical school. And then I tried, like I said, it was starting off as very much resume-y, and then I was like, I want to include the CV aspect of it, but then I didn't really know how to do that. So this is kind of why I'm like over here listing like, okay, awards and scholarships, poster presentations, like I even include references, which again is more like tied to a resume rather than a CV. So let me go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and now show you guys what I did after that. So let me go ahead and share here. Okay. So now this is my more refined CV. And then what I'll do is like, I'll go ahead and kind of put them side by side just so everybody can kind of see what I did here. But basically what I did here is we talked about it and we said, okay, like we got rid of all of this because this is very much like resume style. It's just a lot of words. Like when we're doing actual CVs, we just want to list kind of everything. So what I started off with here, and I also tried to just make it kind of look a little bit more clean, is just listing just all my education here, listing like when I graduated or when I'm expected to graduate. And then what I did is I started off with my research experiences because I felt that this was like,
Ken, I'm going to interrupt just to ask you a couple
go
questions.
ahead.
What did you do with your high school? Why didn't you include your high school on your CV?
Yes. So I had originally had my high school, but after a very nice conversation with Dr. Teraguchi, he mentioned that as we progress in our academia and as we're going into like higher rounds of academia, we don't really put our high school in there anymore. It's not really a necessity. So that kind of just got tossed out. And then in addition to that, what I want to do is highlight the research experiences because while talking, clinical experiences are kind of more shaped to like get into medical school, but now like we're already in medical school. So they're not necessarily as like pertinent into like shaping our CV unless it's like part of our story that we want to tell with our CV. So what I did is I really wanted to highlight my research experiences because I have a couple. So here what I did is, for example, I'll use my research with Dr. Teraguchi as an example here. So I actually did research with Dr. Teraguchi where we focus on visual pathography. And so what I did here is I actually kind of listed what exactly it was that we researched and like what exactly was the importance of it, rather than just kind of listing what I did here. 1 second. What I did here, where I just listed things that I did within the research. Here it's more showing this is the goal of the research project as a whole, and also showing like this was like the reason behind what we did. I also just wanted to also highlight that like it's important to making sure that you're listing like your principal investigator kind of at the top here and just kind of like really showcasing that. And then instead of doing like all
And then
my
Kim, before you go on, I'm just going to
Yeah.
emphasize the reason the people reading it want to know who you trained under and under what technique. So some people put like, so you put Dr. Wen. Now him being an MD is really important. You trained under MD versus a PhD in EDD because it gives you different techniques. So how you package it. And as we know in academia, titles matter. So did you train under a full professor, assistant professor? So that's why the language of how you list who you trained under is really important. So that's having that full out so that it's clear to the person reading it from an academic, they have a sense of your academic training based on who you trained under.
Right, right. Okay, great. So now what I wanted to do is I still kind of wanted to include some of my experiences from back then, but what I did differently is that I'm kind of showcasing it in a different way in my CV and showing like what the importance of it was. So that's why I kind of labeled it as more of community engagement. So for me, for example, one of the things that I really like to do is really work with underserved communities, and that's something that I want to do in the future. So in my CV, like I feel like it's very important to kind of showcase that. So I took clinical experiences that I had and also other experiences that I had that actually worked with underserved communities. So for example, like I'm doing RFC this year, and then as well as I had done Project Spell, which is where I tutored English as a second language for many like frontline employees at UCLA. And so those are like both of my forms of community engagement and how I kind of use other experiences to tie into it together. And then next, what I included is just like mentorship and leadership positions, which I was actually surprised at like actually how many I had, and I didn't really consider them to be. So obviously I'm hosting the workshop with Dr. Teraguchi and Kevin, so I'm part of the MSC, and I am the professionalism representative this year. So I'm including that in my CV as well as other experiences that I had. For example, I did a summer internship here at the School of Medicine where I was a pathway programs mentor. So I even went as far as listing my mentees here that I helped throughout the summer. Which after speaking with Dr. Teraguchi, like I realized how important it is to showcase that as well, because when you mentor somebody, their accomplishments also become your accomplishments because you assisted them in that way. And then next is just also other organizations where I also facilitated different things such as peers. And then I was also a director for Endo March, which was a club I was in undergrad, but I also wanted to showcase that here because OB-GYN is something that I am interested in, as well as like the importance of endometriosis. So I really wanted to kind of showcase that on my CV as well. So then in the next part, I listed some awards and scholarships. And then with the awards and scholarships, it's important to kind of tell exactly like what the award is, as well as possibly why you got it, and as well as the amount. Prior to this, I had literally just listed it here on the side, as you can see. And I feel like anybody else reading it is like, okay, cool, what is that? So here I listed like even as far as the amount that I had gotten and as well as like why I received it. And then I even included my presentations and invited speaker panels, which was really cool because I didn't know that like this, again, this was the way you're supposed to list it. On this side, I literally just listed my poster presentation here, but I didn't even realize that you can also include speaker panels on your CV as well, especially when you're invited, because it is an honor to be able to speak to others about your experiences and things like that. So I went ahead and listed a poster presentation that I had with Dr. Teraguchi in July. I also listed a speaker panel that I was on for my master's program in biomedicine, as well as an additional medical student panel that I had just done recently giving to the master program. I also listed some of my interest groups that I'm in, and these are just kind of right now the interest groups that I'm a part of, just because these are the specialties that I'm looking into and like what I'm hoping to go into. And then professional memberships. I also have certifications and licensing, for example, such as like my BLS certification, which I know most of us all have, but as well as like my certified nursing assistant that I had received. I think it's also important to list hobbies and interests, which Kevin, Dr. Teraguchi, and I all talked about. I think it really adds a more personal experience on the CV, for example, and it also kind of gives more to talk about, right? It's like leading points as to, okay, like tell me more about hiking, for example, for me, or like movie theaters. I love going to the movie theater. So I feel like that's always a great talking point for me. And then lastly, I just listed languages. So I am professional proficiency in reading, writing, and speaking in Spanish. I would not say I am fluent or a native speaker, and I just want to stress that, as Dr. Teraguchi also stressed to me, because sometimes people will test you and see what you know and maybe even conduct interviews in Spanish, which I have had the pleasure of doing. But yeah, so just once again, like as a side-by-side comparison here, I feel like the CV is a lot more, here goes a full list, here goes everything that matters here and why it matters, and it kind of tells a story, versus on the resume side, I feel like it's giving more of the roles that I've had, techniques that I've learned, skills, and things like that. So I feel like my CV is a little bit more holistic of everything that I've actually done. But yeah, that is it for me.
Hey, Kim, can you talk a little bit when you saw, when we had the conversation, when you initially had your CV, how did you feel? And then how do you feel now? And just like, gosh, because so some people like, gosh, I have a long ways to go, but kind of talk about your journey a little bit emotionally about it.
Yeah, so originally it was really funny because you'll see Kevin's is a lot more refined. And so then when I saw Kevin's, I was like, oh, great. I was like, mine is horrible. So initially I was kind of like, oh gosh, like, what am I going to do? It's going to take me a minute to get everything done and like figure it all out. However, I will say, yes, it took a couple of drafts, but I did have so much hidden in my resume that like I didn't realize. And a lot of it was also formatting, I felt like. So like a lot of it was just like, okay, where do we put this? How can we change it so that it's actually telling the story of what a CV is? And so in the middle of it, I was like, okay, actually, I feel like I can do this. Like, this is great. And at the end, I feel very content with like how it ended up. I feel like it actually looks like a CV, like when you look up what a CV looks like. And yeah, that's my overall experience.
And do you think it's the format you have? It looks like it'll be easy to upkeep too. So as you build things, taking the time now, you can just keep adding things, building it. So talk a little bit about at least projecting the maintenance of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I feel like even now, just because it's very like listed, and then also because I kind of formatted it a certain way to where, okay, all my dates are on this side. Everything that like I did here is listed on this side, right? When I add something, all I literally have to do is literally just go under, and like right on top of it, I can just start typing, and it's just as simple as that. So I feel like it's really important to kind of like have that nature of the CV. So that way, as you go on, it's so easy. Like, oh my gosh, I did a student speaker panel today. Let me just add it into my CV so I don't forget. And I feel like it'll make it so much easier for like residency applications in the future, because it's like all right there, which is something I didn't have for when I was applying to medical school. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do these last 4 years?
I I just wanted to add that's an extremely important point about the future and what Dr. Teraguchi just mentioned in terms of carrying it forward. And as I'm mentioning, the CV is such an important part of your future in terms of when you're applying for jobs and applying for residency or as an attending in the future. I really want to emphasize that, I look at the CV in the purpose of also, obviously in a different point of my career, but in terms of when a credentialer looks at your CV. So the credentialer is someone at an organization like a hospital or clinic that's going to be granting you clinical privileges wherever you're working. They use your CV as a guide. So for example, Kim, if you can go to I think it was on the fourth page or the third page. Could you scroll down?
Yes.
On that, I'm sorry, next page. One more page. Yes, right there, where you listed certifications and licensures. That part's really important because a credentialer looks at that and they say, okay, that's what they're going to use to look at, for example, the Medical Board of California when you get, let's say, when you're in training and you get a PTL versus a full-on unrestricted license in the state of California. They use that information on a website called Breeze, breeze.ca.gov to verify that you're actually a licensed physician. And for example, you'll list your DEA there, your NPI number, you already have your BLS there. Or as you get further trainings like ACLS, also PALS, all of those things are extremely important to list along with the numbers, when you got them, when they expire, because that's what they're going to use as part of their credentialing. So, like Dr. Teraguchi mentioned, this is an awesome piece for you to carry forward and easily for you to maintain once you have all those things kind of, in that flow already. So this is great.
Great. Thank you.
And it's almost a booster of confidence, Kim. Like, I didn't know I did all this stuff. It actually feels good when you're done with it because you're like, wow, this is, it's about the packaging. So it can be a booster. I think lots of people, when they start their CV, like, I don't have anything to promote. And then we figured all these cool things out. I think when we get to Kevin's, we'll see something similar, like, wow, I didn't know I could add all these different things. So, well, we are ready to turn over to Kevin.
Yes, perfect. Let me stop my share.
Awesome. Good job, Kim. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Does this work?
And one thing, Kevin, as you're presenting, talk a little bit important about font size.
Oh, yes. Yes, I will. Okay. Let's see. I can swap between the two of them, I think. Okay. Screen. Okay. You guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So I'll start with my original CV. As Dean Danny kind of alluded to, it does look, I guess, more like a CV, look it up a little bit. How I formatted it was, as you mentioned earlier, education at the top, public health over here, research experience below, then the teaching, mentoring, leadership experience, and then like memberships, awards, and presentation. In terms of where, in a nutshell, I could improve on this or how I improved on this, one thing that Dean Danny just mentioned is that font size. I think the font size here was like 11 or something. So I bumped it up to 12, as you'll see in like the revised version. Another thing too
Well,
that
Kevin, I'll point out just a little bit. I tease them a little bit with that. There are going to be more people my age looking at it. And as they get older, the font size really does matter. And so you want to make it easy on the reader. And that's why the formatting, and Dr. Wayne could talk about this too, people scan things. You want to make it easy to read quickly. And if you're making it hard on the reader, that's not good for you. So just remember, there's going to be more people, probably Dr. Wynn and our age, reading it. And I don't want to admit it. I like bigger font size now that I'm older. So that's why you want to be easy on the reader.
And I want to add, I know you can't tell, but these are the thin version of my glasses. So I can't see if it's too small, like Dr. Teraguchi mentioned.
Right. So that's what I changed in like the second version. And another thing too, along with the topic of readability, is that you'll see that I didn't bold the dates, and you'll see that's another change I made. Another thing too is you might have seen in Kim's revised version that the research was formatted in such a way that it emphasized like the PI's training, which I didn't do for my first version. So that's something you'll see different as well. I think that's, and also once again, same thing as Kim said earlier in terms of like awards and honors, like I had it there, but I didn't explain what they were. So that's another thing I did. And also in terms of like kind of squeezing out more presentations out of what I've done, I basically added all the workshops, presentations, and panels that I was on. And just to illustrate all of that, I will move over to my revised version. So as I mentioned earlier, I bolded the dates. I added a few things that were a little bit more recent. I reformatted it so that I basically didn't include like the month in like the dates. It's just the years, just to keep everything simple and clean. Another thing too, as I alluded to earlier, is I reformatted my research in such a way that I emphasized that my PI's training, for example, adding that, for example, my PI, Dr. Brelsford, he's an assistant professor of biology, and my former PI, Dr. Dehesh, she's a distinguished professor of molecular biochemistry. So just emphasizing titles since that's important. Another thing too, I think what Dean Danny mentioned earlier is like the right kind of categories, I guess. So just reframing things from like work experience to more like teaching, mentorship, leadership, because that's something that we'll be doing throughout our careers. And let's see here. Yeah. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, let's see. In terms of like I guess expanding the number of like selected presentations, panels, and workshops I did, I basically added more things besides the poster presentation, like even just me doing workshops as a tutor, me speaking as a panel recently as a health coach alumni, even this like workshop right here I added. So anything where like you're speaking to like a group of people in like a kind of formal manner, you can just throw it. I got the impression I got is you can just throw it in there and it fits right in on the CV. And also, as I kind of mentioned earlier, like explaining what my awards and honors were, like just to give context for someone I don't know from like Iowa who has no idea what like it is or something like that, or like a random stranger, they would be able to know. And also in terms of hobbies and interests, this one I'm a little bit unsure about, but I had a little more detail because like because the one thing I looked up online was like ideally on like a CV or something, ideally it should be something that makes the person doesn't go like, oh, meh, or like it like captures their interest. So I decided to add a little more detail. For example, for basketball, like I do intramural basketball, and for running, I recently ran a 5K at the Turkey Trot recently in the Rose Bowl. So I don't know if it's exactly relevant, but I decided to add those just to give it more personality, I guess.
Well, and part of the hobbies and interests too, it also shows you're beyond your academics. It provides a well-roundedness of it, but you do have to pick them carefully. You don't want to be seen negatively. It gives it enrichment. So be thoughtful what you put in there. Sometimes it can be kind of unique things that are there, but it just adds a layer that you do things outside of academic as well. And then Kevin, if you go up to your research part, I want to emphasize something about the research section. Sometimes many of you early in your career are maybe just working on things. So you can also, if you took like his first one there, you could put another section underneath his first research and put scholarly productivity. It may not be published yet. You could put something under there that you're working on a manuscript, an article, that just showing that you're producing things there. And if you don't have a lot of poster presentations under there, you could actually list it under research so they can see coming from that lab, you are productive in there. As you get more and more publications, presentations, you can create its own section. So those are other things that you can do just so that you can show that you're being productive in that lab. Like, for example, I'm working on an article. I haven't submitted it yet, but I do list it as we're working on the article with the expectation to submit it by the end of this time frame, and so that they know you can do in there. So again, it's showing your academic productivity. So you can label it in different ways to emphasize that element of it.
That about wraps up my, oh, sorry, Danny.
So talk a little bit about the other application where, you mentioned like presentation things. It's finding those things that you had in your old presentation that we kind of found, like you mentioned, you've done these workshops and present. Now, it's finding those, so you can always go through that, anything that you present. And I think that's where, I think when we first did it, you had very few here, but really emphasizing those things. If you just have to be careful not to double list it. So if you put it in the research section, you don't put it in below, but really finding those hidden gems of being invited to different events, workshops, panels. As you get more progressive, you can decide to select a presentation. You can start to remove stuff as you get more things that may be more prestigious. But for now, I think it's really good. And you'll see that you bold your name so they know where you are in the authorship of what those look like. Right. All right, we can pause, see if we have questions from the group. If you have any questions about your CVs or anything you want to ask Kevin, Dr. Wen, or Kim and I, what questions does the group have?
Yeah, it can be literally anything. We're here to answer anything.
And if you ever want to meet with any of us, Umberto, I saw that you're there. Do you want to say a quick hello?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Kevin, Kim, good job on the presentation. Looks lovely. One question that I have for you all, and see how you answer this, is as M1s, M2s get started with their medical student journey, what do you recommend in terms of undergraduate research, post-bac research included into their CV at this state in their career?
Do you want me to take that?
Oh, some people, it looks like School of Medicine is out.
Oh, I wonder, did they lose connection? They must be in the, are you all not in the med school?
Not
Oh.
today.
Oh
So
yeah, they just the internet just went out. Sorry about that.
yeah, I figured
Yeah.
we can tell who's not at the school. We'll wait for them to come back on.
Yeah, and I can ask the question again, but I know this is being recorded, so for those that get to look at it
I'm actually
later.
here. I don't know what
Oh, there you go.
I don't know how Emily has internet access here. I'm still at the school. I lost internet access.
Yeah, everybody, it happens all the time. So I don't know how the recording is going to come out too.
Oh man, yeah, sorry about that. Or I guess it's the school's fault, but still.
Oh, well,
Um,
we'll see if it stays. Look, it's still recording on mine, so hopefully it stays. But what, Umberto, repeat your question.
Excuse me, sorry, I had a cough. So to keep it a little bit shorter is as medical students in year one and year two start to think about their CV, how important or should they include some of their undergraduate research experience or post-bac experience? And what can you talk about that as they start to create a CV?
So I'll start and others can chime in. I think it's all about telling that story. What I would say, you can even include in high school. If, for example, if you're in a research lab and you want to show that longevity that's there, you may have started as a summer research as a high school student, and you can see that longevity. It's all about relevance of what that looks like. Undergraduate research is totally fine as well. I think if you're doing some of your student interest groups undergrad, maybe less relevant unless you want to show longitudinal nature of it. I think even Kim had done some stuff undergraduate with mentoring. So it's telling that story. And as you progress, it really is what you're looking for over that length of time. So I think that'd be the biggest thing to do. And like I said, you can even include high school to show that commitment to that long-term piece. And even things like, I was working with a first-year student, they were a mechanic. And why it's not really sometimes relevant on a CV, but what was really cool about his experience, because he had to work full-time, he didn't have a lot of other activities, but what was really important is he got promoted twice from a salesperson to the manager, and he was supervising 5 to 6 people. I said, that is really important to show that professional experience and that you did evaluations and performance review. And anybody who supervised somebody, that's a big skill set. Not a lot of people early in their career have supervised people to performance review. So we added that piece that's there. So it's really telling the story of what you have to find those gems and how you present it. And then as you progress, if you have a 50-page resume or CV, you may not start to include all that stuff because it's not as relevant. I think I had told Kim, high school is important when you get to college, right? Those grades in undergraduate are important when you get to med school, but when you get to med school, those grades don't matter a whole lot because you're already in med school. Right? Each stage, sometimes the details don't matter as much as long as you get to, because I will never tell a lot of people my undergraduate GPA doesn't matter now of where I am now, right? But I got my degree, that's all that matters, right? So it all depends on what stage you are and how you're presenting that story. And then, Umberto, I'd even say what order that you want to do it in as well, what story, because you see both Kim and Kevin took a different style in terms of the order of the importance for what they're presenting. And Kevin may switch it around. If he's applying to something more teaching, he might lift up the teaching stuff and put the research a little bit lower, depending on what he's applying to. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, everybody from the building. I sound like the internet cut out a little bit. So welcome back, everybody.
Thank you for answering that question. And we do get that question quite a bit as they start to think about their CV. So appreciate it. Kim, Kevin, if you want to add anything to that, feel free to, but that was a good answer.
I think something I kind of didn't mention too much in the presentation is something that I took out in like an even earlier draft of the CV was like some early college stuff, like awards I got at like the beginning of college. So I think as Dean Danny kind of alluded to, the CV is constantly evolving, and ideally it's kind of like the transition from how when you're in college, you kind of take away high school stuff. It's like ideally as you progress in med school, you take away the college stuff. So it's something I was like transitioning out basically, and will probably continue to transition out as I continue to do more stuff in med school. So just wanted to emphasize.
And Kevin, you're talking things like the dean's list, which you had on there, which is not as probably relevant. It's kind of important as an undergraduate, but not as important as now that you're in med school, right? Those kind of things.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Kim, some thoughts from you about kind of how you approach putting things on from early on to now?
No, I think the way Kevin said it was really great. For me, it was more of like, what exactly do I want to portray? And so, like, I guess along the lines, I guess as cheesy as it is, what story do I want to tell, like, with my academia and what I've done? And so, yeah, I agree. I think depending on like what position I want to apply to, or like if I want to do more of like a teaching position over the summer versus a research position, then like maybe I'll switch things around and do things like that. Personally, I just applied to a research position, so it was nice to have all like my research right there at the top and show those experiences. But yeah, I think it's more so just like, okay, we can tweak out some things. And I feel like sometimes it's scary to do that because it's like, oh my gosh, but like, what if this was important? And like, what if this was the thing that I needed to show? But I think as long as like overall you're showing the story that you want to show to whatever it is you're applying to, I think then that's what matters when giving your CV.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of the formatting?
Yeah. I really, really like the new way that my CV looked before. I mean, after, sorry, because before it was very resume style. And so I feel like it was challenging to really like see, okay, how do I format this? And again, how do I format this in a way that it's easy to just, plug in things when I need to or move things around that's in an easy way. So I think finding that was a little bit tricky and like definitely it like requires some things with like Word and ensuring that you kind of know how to do some little tricks on there. But I think once you like find like, okay, this is where I want my dates to go, this is where I want my, positions to go, then I think from that point on, then it's a lot easier. And I think it's better to do the struggle now than to do it in the future when you're piled with applications.
Kevin, thoughts on your formatting and some of the challenges as well?
Yeah, I think in terms of like formatting, I liked what you do. I think you have it so that you have like the entries in like a table, but like you have the borders invisible. I think that's like a good workaround, I guess. I like that. In terms of formatting specifically for my CV, yeah, like I guess for me, like one critical thing, like I emphasized earlier, was increasing the font size. Ensuring that there aren't really any weird like page breaks and stuff like that. So it's a lot of little things that's like, and it's hard to like just say just do it and like do it, but it's something that I think is really helped me like make sure that I feel good about my CV in terms of making sure that it's readable and like that someone can just pick it up and like be able to get it without like struggling.
Yeah, just remember the audience who's going to be reading it. Now, I don't know if Dr. Wen will agree with me or not in terms of generational styles, but I feel like the older I am, the cleaner I want the CV to be easy to read. And I feel like younger generations like a lot of stimuli. Like you have a website, you got to have like 14 different things going on and things like that. For me, that's distracting, so it's harder to read. And you'll see some CVs that have different designs and different kind of ways of displaying that. For me, I think because I'm used to a cleaner look, it's easier to read when it's all down in one thing. So just remember who your audience is. Now, if you're applying to maybe a design firm or something that's a little more technology advanced, maybe you demonstrate that through the CV. So know your audience well. I would just remind us more people, Umberto and Dr. Len, it's going to be more our age looking at it. So you got to make it easy for us. And like Kevin emphasized, if you say UCR SOM and they don't know what that means, that inhibits them to understand your CV. So try to spell things out. And even if you do it multiple times, because they may say, gosh, I'm only looking at the second page. You saw Dr. Wen only look at the fourth page. If you only looked at the fourth page and they doesn't know what the abbreviations are, you could be in trouble there. So it can be a pain to spell everything out every time, but you want to make sure that the reader knows what context that you are. So when you say, you got a scholarship and it's the Kevin scholarship, they have no idea what that means. Is it a $500 scholarship? Was it $5? Was it $10,000? It gives a kind of scope. Was it competitive? Did they just hand them out? And I think finding that sort of nature adds the weight and prestige of those awards. Any last questions, thoughts? And hopefully the recording did. Otherwise, Kim and Kim, we may have to do a practice session again and kind of just do the workshop, but hopefully it retained it. I see it's recording, so hopefully it saved it on mine, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. I think I recorded it via cloud, so it should hopefully be fine. Hopefully.
Perfect.
Caroline and Emily, what did you learn? What did you feel like most useful from the session? What did you take away that you could use right away?
I'll go first. One thing I took away from the session was the emphasis on who you did research under, and also that I need to do a little more digging like myself if I want to be able to show all the things that I did over the last several years too. I know my CV is not up to date, but I think if I were to sit down and actually think and dig through my past, I can find a lot now after seeing what we discussed in this session. I did have a question, real quick question, not to tangent, but for the resume and the CV, is it a big difference if we put like our personal email or school email?
I think it depends. Typically in a professional setting, you want to put your professional email, what that looks like. Now, sometimes, when I'm applying for job CVs, particularly if it's confidential, I honestly sometimes I don't put my work, I put my Gmail just because I don't want the work one. Somebody seeing it that I'm applying that they may not know of. Sometimes your Gmail works better just because it's more long-term, because sometimes your school emails go away. But professionally, as a med student, you should probably put your professional email. And then if you have like a private one, just make sure it's not something you made when you're like 5 years old and it says something cute or fancy. That make sure it's professional. Sometimes it's like, I remember there was like, the bees honey or something like that. It was just very cute. That's what they call it. So just make sure it's a professional email if you do use a personal one. But typically at this stage, you want to try to use your professional one unless there's circumstances where it doesn't make sense.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Emily, what about you? What did you take away?
Yes, I really liked how I think Dr. Teriguchi talked a lot about like knowing your audience and kind of knowing who you're presenting your CV towards. And I think that's something that's super important because I think for me, like my CV looks a lot like Kim, like your first CV, where it's kind of just like a resume and I'm kind of just like listing things out. And so I think that, after this session, I'll probably try to just go and try to format it more so it's like more of like an explanation of what I'm doing, more so than like a list or like a summary.
And Berto, some wisdom from you about how they describe things in terms of the CV and how they approach that.
One of the things that we use in OCRA, especially when Alex really talks about CVs, and that I like that he uses is action verbs, right? Is putting some of those actions into your CV so that you can really tell the story. That's what the CV is doing, is telling the story that you're trying to portray, which we've heard quite a bit today. And the last thing that I want to add there on top of that is your audience is important, right? Whatever you're applying to is important to understand, because sometimes you don't know if you're applying to or trying to get an opportunity that is 100 applicants or 1,000 applicants. That's going to make a difference where how important, how easy to read your CV is going to be. So think about that elevator pitch, right? When you think about interviews as well, make sure that the reader can read your CV, understand your CV within those 30 seconds, that minute, however long they spend on it. Because if they have 1,000 applications, they're not going to read 10 minutes per CV. They're going to look at it in seconds. And if you move on to the next round, they'll go a little deeper. So you still want the strength there, but easy access is going to be important. I think those are the things I would add in terms of, as you all consider your research opportunities, professional opportunities, and finally, that residency application.
I think just to emphasize what Umberto said, you led a session, right? That word. And like even in the research, I developed, the hypothesis and I did it from scientific process, or I learned this technique and sound like a researcher, use the language that's there to be there. And I did oversight or I mentor. So you want to show kind of your role in that place that you can see that. And you saw in Kevin's and a couple of them at a long term where you see the progression of responsibility in long term. Again, we played around with that a little bit, Kevin, like how to format that, because it's like different days, but it was really important to see that Kevin had a long-term commitment and that they kept giving him more and more responsibilities. That's really important to display. Dr. Wen, any final remarks, advice for the group?
I just wanted to add, again, sorry, my optics are a little skewed because I'm actually the chair of the credentialing committee at my clinic here at UCR. And so I review all the CVs that come through our clinic for all sorts of different health professions, from physicians, mid-levels, NPs, PAs, all the RNs and whatnot. I wanted to add also another important piece in terms of a credentialing standpoint. Now, this doesn't affect you immediately right now, but being that Dr. Teriguchi mentioned, this CV is something that, it's a living portfolio that you're going to be carrying forward with you in the future. an important part of it is also to include when you're putting your dates, including the month. So month and year, because I will tell you now, this doesn't affect you now, but as an attending in the future, one thing that I have to look for when I go through these applications and these CVs is to look for any gaps of employment greater than 30 days. It triggers an automatic red flag in our credentialing system, and I manually have to go ask the applicant, what did you do? Why was there a break of more than 30 days? It's we're not required to ask if you took like a break between, let's say, residency and fellowship or residency and your first job, because it's understood. You were at residency when you finish, you've been in school for 20 something years. It's time to take some time off, right? But let's say you're an attending and then you took 2 months off, 3 months off, they always wonder, okay, what happened? Was there something that we should know about? And so if there's anything over 30 days, it triggers a required response. And so that's why it's important to list month and year when you're, especially for your jobs. It's extremely important. Again, because I mentioned to you, it's very important to your credentialer. The more you make their job easier, the less likely they're going to continue to call you, text you, and email you when you're already busy or on vacation and you're like, why is this credential bothering me so much? It's because they're trying to get that information and they're getting everything from your CV.
I'll just emphasize what Dr. Wood said. Any gap that is obvious, what you don't want to have happen is the reader make assumptions of what that gap is. You want to control your narrative of what's there. So, say even you're applying to med school and you took 2 years off and there's a big gap in some activity, you could explain, it's all contextual. Jobs definitely, because they're like, gosh, I saw Umberto, you had a year off. Like, what were you doing in that year? Usually we have negative things. Oh, he must have been suspended or something like that, versus, maybe he had a child, stopped for a family, or maybe he won a trip around the world, a lottery, so that who knows, right? But you want to control your narrative because you don't want them to make assumptions. But if you're making them work at it too, like what Umberto said as well, and somebody else has well explained it, it's just easier to go with that candidate that they understand their journey much better. So it will differ as you progress in your professional life. Good. Well, Kim, Kevin, any last thoughts before we end?
The only thing I can think of is maybe, yeah, I'd be willing to send like my CV and stuff like that in like the chat or like in the group chat or email or something in case y'all want to like, because I know formatting sometimes a pain in the butt. So like if y'all want to use mine as like a baseline, I'd be happy to send mine in like by email or something like that. Like especially the document form of it, just to make everyone's life easier. But other than that, no thoughts. How about you, Kim?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same. I'd be happy to send both versions of my CVs in case anybody wants to see it again. As well as, you guys will have my email, so if anybody wants to reach out, if you guys want some one-on-one and Dr. Teraguchi's not available, I'm happy to help as well.
And I know, Umberto, you all are working on a website, so it sounds like Kevin and Kim would be happy to post that to the website as good examples. And for that, I love the before and after as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely include this recording in the website, and when either Dr. Teraguchi or Kevin or Kim send out the recording, we're more than welcome to include OCRA's kind of draft CV where they can kind of follow step by step to see some of these ideas. And then obviously it's up to the writer to start to put those important things first versus secondary. But we do have also a PDF, or not a PDF, excuse me, a Word document CV kind of starter kit as well. So we will include that as well. And
always happy to meet to go over your CV at any stage that's there. I was telling Kevin and Kim, I had to apply for my merit. My chair tore up my CV at my stage, and I had to reemphasize it. You're always learning because I don't know what's in front of me. So he's helping me prepare for my next stage, which I didn't know how to do. And so you always want to get that feedback. There's always room to improve what that looks like at whatever stage you're at. So good job, Kim and Kevin. Appreciate your partnership on this. And hopefully the recording worked. Otherwise, we might have to re-record, but hopefully it all captured it. And sorry for the internet in the building. Take care, everybody. Appreciate it.